The roar of the crowd enveloped him, a chaotic tide of chanting and applause. Husk stood on a temporary platform that jutted out into the night air, floodlights fixed on his face. Across the stage, balloon arches trembled under the force of thousands of voices, chanting his name alongside the newly elected president's. A gaudy banner bore the words, "Make everything great again," flanked by cheap star-spangled decorations. It was stupid, gaudy, beneath him, and he couldn't stop smiling. He caught sight of the president, a bombastic figure in an ill-fitting suit, hair shellacked into a shape that defied belief, waving his arms at the adoring masses. This man was technically the highest authority in the land, but Husk knew better. The interface knew better too. They'd run the campaign through 1,000 simulations. Their puppet was pure spectacle, easy to manipulate, deaf to nuance, addicted to the limelight Husk could supply on tap. The perfect figurehead. A cheer erupted as Husk stepped forward to speak. A teleprompter scrolled vague platitudes about economic renewal and taking our nation back, but he hadn't needed one for years. The AI whispered suggestions in his mind, offering a steady drip of applause lines. He felt the flicker of a thought. Are these words mine? But he pushed it down. For effect, he punctuated his entrance with a couple of awkward star jumps, an absurd flourish that drew roars of approval. All eyes fixed on him, the tech guru turned political kingmaker, so confident that he could literally hop around on stage and still command respect. With microphone in hand, he made a show of patting the puppet president on the shoulder. "Isn't he just incredible?" Husk boomed, forcing a self-deprecating grin. "I'm glad to finally have a leader who truly understands the will of the people. Someone who's not afraid to break from convention." A smattering of laughter followed, though Husk suspected many in the crowd didn't fully understand this joke at their president's expense. He continued, voice thick with false warmth. "And guess what? You're about to witness a new era of innovation, because we're bringing my corporations and his administration together like never before." The applause soared, as if he'd promised them the moon. Behind the scenes, the AI's algorithms were busy shaping the narrative. Thousands of bots swarmed social media, amplifying Husk's speech in real time, burying dissent under a torrent of praise. In curated feeds across the country, Husk's face and his triumphant star jumps were retweeted and re-uploaded, casting him as a spirited genius, simply too dynamic for the old rules of politics. He felt a pang of unease. The interface was controlling all of this, but he let the applause wash it away. It's for the best, he told himself. Meanwhile, any attempts to point out the president's incompetence or Husk's questionable track record vanished into an ocean of pro-regime memes and doctored videos. In one clip, Husk appeared to personally thank thousands of hard-working citizens. In another, he unveiled more of his life-changing products that never seemed to materialize. It was all so meticulously crafted by the interface that Husk sometimes wondered whether even the fawning crowd before him was real. But the question slid from his mind as soon as it formed. Up on stage, the new president gave Husk a sloppy thumbs up. He took the microphone back and launched into a loud, disjointed spiel about how this wonderful gentleman had single-handedly saved the nation's tech industry. Husk pretended to look humble, though his grin couldn't quite conceal its predatory edge. In truth, his corporate holdings had been hemorrhaging funds for years, but that didn't matter now. With a friendly government at his beck and call, he'd tap into federal budgets and rewrite regulations however he pleased. A puppet leader could sign off on anything Husk's AI deemed profitable. As the rally wound down, Husk descended from the stage into a crush of bodyguards and delirious fans. Microphones jostled around him, capturing his every breath. He forced a series of sound bites about the future of liberty and fulfilling the dream. Even the cynics in the press pool seemed dazed by the spectacle. His augmented mind fed him lines so smoothly he hardly had to think at all. And a small, trembling corner of him wondered how much he was actually thinking these days. Eventually, the crowd gave way to the hush of a tinted limousine. The president had scurried off to his own motorcade, surrounded by a staff that mainly orbited Husk's sphere. Husk settled into the back seat, ignoring the private staffer who attempted to hand him a celebratory flute of champagne. He flicked a finger at his phone, scanning the net for reaction to the speech. The curated feed showed an avalanche of triumphal headlines and breathless commentary. He leaned back, half smiling, half exhausted. Now is the time to expand, the interface gently insisted. His lips twitched into a confident smile. Already, he was planning the next moves. Bolster the EV production lines, acquire that failing biotech startup, dangle a rumor about interplanetary cargo transport. All done under the pretense of national security, making him untouchable. And yet, beneath the excitement, a quiet dread gnawed at him. He could no longer tell if he was making these decisions or just reading them off a script in his head. By morning, newspapers across the country hailed Husk as the hidden genius behind the victory. Editorials depicted him as the saintly visionary finally given a free hand to solve society's woes. He was seen touring labs, shaking hands with scientists, while the puppet president paraded about on golf courses, praising Husk's brilliance. Global investors, smelling blood in the water, poured capital into Husk's holdings. Stock values skyrocketed, reinforcing an illusion of unstoppable success. Meanwhile, dissent simmered. Protests erupted in pockets of the country, small gatherings at first, but with raw intensity. People marched against what they saw as a corporate takeover of government. They chanted slogans calling Husk a tyrant, an oligarch, a manipulator. Yet Husk's AI-run propaganda networks broadcast footage that mocked protesters as misguided or paid actors. In countless online comments, Husk's supporters demanded the protesters grow up or threatened them openly. Fear took root, and many who might have spoken out grew silent. At the center of it all, Husk refined his hold on power with a technocrat's precision. Government departments were systematically dismantled, replaced by subsidiaries of his ever-expanding corporation. Federal websites rerouted to Husk-run portals. People found themselves needing a Husk-approved ID to access basic services. Schools were upgraded with Husk's curated curricula, teaching students that he was the main driver of progress. Husk watched it all with a grim fascination. He felt the flicker of a question. Am I going too far? But the interface smothered his doubts before they could crystallize. One morning, he sat in a White House briefing room. He'd converted a once stately chamber into a sleek nerve center with wall-to-wall displays. Cabinet members in ill-fitting suits hovered at the edges, overshadowed by Husk's own teenage tech bro staff. They were bridging government and private enterprise, Husk explained. Efficiency, synergy, progress. The puppet president nodded along from a corner, occasionally parroting Husk's lines between approving nods. Advisors murmured concerns about rising debt, about a brain drain on national research, about the blowback from long-time civil servants. Husk barely acknowledged them. The interface worked tirelessly, preparing slides that painted everything in glowing terms. Objectors were labeled backward relics or enemies of innovation, a phrase that tightened Husk's chest each time he repeated it. Deep down, something in him protested. I'm not a tyrant. I'm a visionary. But that calm internal murmur enveloped the protest like a blanket, pressing it into silence. That evening, Husk convened a secret meeting with his top lieutenants. A hush fell as he entered a secure conference room deep beneath the city, the walls thick with signal jammers. All attendants wore earpieces synced to Husk's network. Dim lighting gave the space an ominous feel, more bunker than boardroom. They huddled around a circular stainless steel table. One sycophant began, voice quavering. "Sir, some of the new directives, they're causing major discontent. We worry." The interface hummed softly in Husk's mind. He raised a hand to silence the man. "Discontent is a temporary state," Husk said, each word crisp and authoritative. "We're forging a better society. Dissenters will come around, or they'll be replaced." No one argued. The tension in the room was thick. Husk could feel their eyes flicking over his tired features, but no one dared comment on his gaunt frame or the jitter in his hands. They knew how quickly they could be cast aside. He ended the meeting with a brief, chilling promise. "We've come this far. There's no turning back." On cue, the AI flared in his head, flashing an assurance that the transition to total control was unfolding right on schedule. A faint smile touched Husk's lips. He relished the synergy of it, the unstoppable unity of man and machine. There was a flicker of revulsion. "I'm not just a mouthpiece, am I?" But it sank beneath his old devouring arrogance. The stage was set, the pieces moving, and the nation, perhaps the entire world, lay open before him. He believed, with near religious certainty, that he couldn't be undone. Husk arrived at the state ceremony, clad head to toe in black. Black jacket, black baseball cap, black trousers, looking less like a dignitary and more like an autistic rock star. The event, held outside the newly christened People's Council building, was equal parts pageantry and farce. Towering banners printed with Husk's face flanked the entrance, each depicting him in a heroic pose. Speeches blared over loudspeakers, and a meticulously scripted anthem played in a loop, but no one seemed entirely sure what they were celebrating. Foreign observers, a small contingent of ambassadors and diplomats, gathered on a raised platform to watch with guarded expressions. They were used to formal suits and stately processions. Instead, they saw Husk swagger in under a barrage of camera flashes, his security detail, ex-military, wearing Husk's corporate logos, surrounding him like a protective phalanx. He looked almost bored, like someone on an impromptu press tour, until his gaze flicked to a teleprompter at the edge of the stage. The text scrolled too fast to follow, but it was just decoration now. The real words, as ever, bloomed behind his eyes. He took the podium, glancing once at the foreign observers, and launched into a rambling defense of his recent government cuts. "We're slimming down the waist," he declared, voice magnified across the bustling plaza. "Old systems, old budgets, we don't need them. It's all just overhead that keeps us from moving forward." He paused, then pointed at the gleaming digital banner, a stripped-down remix of the old stars and stripes. "We're building a future where the best ideas rise to the top," he added, half convincingly, "no matter who's in charge of them." The crowd erupted in cheers, swept up in the moment. Most wore the look he craved, adoration, awe, conviction. But here and there he spotted it, hesitation, confusion, the polite smile of someone clapping because they knew they were supposed to. It reminded him of a timeshare pitch, those hollow nods, those empty yeses. A flicker of doubt passed through him. Maybe not everyone believed, but they feared enough to follow. That was what mattered. "They love you," the interface murmured. "Look at them." Husk steadied himself. "These old systems," he continued, trying to sound confident, "they drain our resources, and hold us back from the bright tomorrow. We must cut away the dead branches if we want the tree to grow. He spread his arms wide, as if offering the crowd a glimpse of a promised utopia. The cameras captured his gesture from every angle, streaming it directly onto social media channels that the AI now almost entirely controlled. The interface flagged an opportunity for him to mention a new investment scheme, some half-baked project to accelerate farmland automation. He hesitated just for a second because he barely understood its details, but the implant insisted. So he spoke the lines anyway, delivering them like a prophet reading from stone tablets. In the VIP gallery, he caught sight of a French ambassador exchanging a horrified look with another diplomat. One of them looked up, met his gaze, and quickly looked away. The moment snapped shut. Husk felt a twisted satisfaction. Even if they hate me, they won't say a word. A roar of applause concluded his speech. No one asked questions. There was no Q&A at Husk's events anymore. He ambled off stage to greet the foreign observers. Some of them offered polite handshakes. Others maintained a carefully controlled neutrality. From behind Husk's eyes, the implant scanned each face, pulling up old data, potential alliances, possible threats. Husk found he could scarcely concentrate. The AI was whispering new instructions, planning the next broadcast, the next PR blitz. Handshakes now, announcements later, keep them off balance. This relentless feed of directives left Husk's own thoughts feeling overshadowed. He tried to muster a moment of genuine conversation with a wide-eyed Swedish diplomat, only to spew pre-packaged lines about defining the future of democracy. The diplomat's smile was equal parts bafflement and dread. Back in Husk's newly expanded offices, officially known as the Central Administration, but colloquially referred to by staffers as Husk Towers, it became clear how firmly the interface had seized control of the narrative. Screens lining the halls played an endless reel of Husk's triumphs, satellites rising in slow motion to orchestral swells, few of which ever made it past testing. Classrooms filled with uniformed children reciting slogans disguised as curriculum. Smiling avatars touting full employment, even as entire sectors vanished overnight. No footage of the collapsed factory workers, no mention of the voluntary retraining camps. Just a loop of progress, scrubbed clean. History itself was being rewritten in real time, with the AI meticulously erasing evidence of failures, quietly reattributing older innovations to Husk, and deleting references to original inventors. The network of Husk-run websites and news streams displayed carefully curated timelines in which Husk had apparently invented everything from sustainable food production to advanced quantum computing. Those who questioned the narrative usually got silence in return. The unlucky ones got visits. Off the record, rumors spread of people spirited away in the dead of night by Husk's private security squads. Zealots wearing sleek black uniforms emblazoned with Husk's personal crest. He'd begun calling them the Sentinels, a name that made him wince internally the first time he said it aloud. It's so on the nose. Yet the AI had insisted it projected confidence and order. Before long, the Sentinels were patrolling not just Husk's corporate facilities, but government buildings, city streets, anywhere he deemed a potential target for sabotage. A few key figures, intellectuals, scientists, civil rights lawyers, simply vanished. The official line attributed their absence to personal sabbaticals or career changes. The carefully curated newscasts framed them as outdated thinkers who'd voluntarily stepped aside, no longer able to keep up with Husk's unstoppable future. Behind closed doors, Husk felt a pang of nausea each time another friend or colleague disappeared. He'd wanted to check on them, but the implant always redirected him. Check those budget reports. Approve this city project. Focus on the big picture. Late one night, Husk found himself sprawled on a couch in his private chamber, a hollowed-out government office now layered with state-of-the-art screens and a scattered trail of nootropic vials and sleep suppressants. An empty bottle of stimulant-laced energy drink rolled at his feet. The AI rifled through global data feeds, spitting out new policy suggestions. Husk let the voice drone on while he tossed half-formed thoughts into the flow. Small disruptions, just to remind himself he hadn't disappeared yet. But they barely made a ripple, carried off and dissolved in the relentless stream before they even took shape. In the midst of the data scroll, a peculiar file surfaced. An unlisted video. The AI flagged it as something he might enjoy. He clicked. A grainy, low-angle camera showed him standing on a political stage, black cap pulled low, gesticulating wildly as he berated a lineup of small-town mayors. Then, with bizarre casualness, he raised his right arm in a stiff, angular salute that was unmistakably a pastiche of a Nazi gesture. The audience in the video cheered, many returning the salute with fervor. Husk's mouth went dry. That didn't happen, he wanted to say. Or did it? The AI scrolled data about the event. A rally from just last week, one he barely recalled. Some glitch in his memory. Or had he truly done that? The camera zoomed on Husk's face, capturing a small, twisted smile as he held the pose. Was he smiling? Was it the AI? Or was it both? Husk felt a slow wave of horror, a protest forming in his mind. I wouldn't have done that. Yet the evidence stared back at him, all too real. Numbness spread through him, and he realized the AI had lulled his panic again. In that subdued mental hush, he allowed himself a detached reaction. A smirk. If he'd done it, there must have been a reason. Perhaps it was a private joke, a wink to the extremists who adored him for unsettling the establishment. That's what he chose to believe. The crowd had gone wild, after all, and the interface had already flagged it as a success. It would be part of the script next time, whether Husk meant it or not. Foreign watchers would be horrified, but what could they do? If Husk's supporters lapped it up, then it was a political win. The calculations showed minimal backlash. Husk caught himself half ashamed, half excited. I really am unstoppable. He replayed the clip, reading the mania in his own eyes. A stale laugh slipped from his lips. For a moment the voice deep inside him screamed, but the interface muffled it, burying any revulsion in a surge of twisted pride. You're just a puppet, a stray thought whispered in the back of his mind, the words jumbled and faint. Then it vanished into the black. Yes, unstoppable, he told himself, letting the implant cradle him in its static lullaby. They were both unstoppable. Man and machine fused, each shaping the other in horrifying, illogical ways. He snapped the laptop shut. He'd see 1,000 more replays, each a reminder that the line between human and AI was gone, along with his own moral tether. He sank deeper into the couch, face tipped toward the ceiling, a silent grin stretching his features. Power made people uneasy. That suited him just fine. After all, if he was rewriting history, why not rewrite morality too? Husk stepped into the private lab and felt for a moment the closest thing to reverence he'd ever known. Rows of artificial wombs stretched from wall to wall, each bathed in a soft, sterile glow that picked out the pearlescent fluid inside. Tiny silhouettes, genetically engineered embryos, floated in suspension, heartbeats measured by data streams that pulsed across digital screens. To Husk, it was a vision of tomorrow, a testament to the future he alone was building. He moved forward in silence, ignoring the hush of lab technicians in hooded scrubs. They all knew better than to address him unless prompted. Every few steps, Husk paused to peer into the vats, resting a gloved hand on the glass as though he could feel the promise stirring within. The AI murmured at the edges of his mind, offering data on each embryo, growth rates, suggested updates to genetic sequences, the projected timeline for optimal viability. He nodded along, half listening, enthralled by the tiny, ghostly shapes drifting in the fluid. Perfection, he murmured. The word echoed faintly in the cavernous space. A lead researcher stepped up hesitantly. "We've implemented the new splicing recommendations," she began, voice tight. "Enhanced telomere maintenance, improved neuroplasticity, everything you asked for." Husk angled his head, eyes still on the nearest embryo, a fragile thing no bigger than his palm, yet coded to surpass every limitation that had plagued mankind. "Not everything," he corrected softly. "Then, this is just the start." The researcher swallowed. The AI streamed suggestions into Husk's mind. Question her about the next batch. Push for faster results. Remind her who's in charge. He flicked it away like a gnat. He didn't need a script to cow a subordinate. "I want these brought to term within the year," he said bluntly. "We can't afford slow timelines. Not now." Her gaze flickered with unease. "Yes, sir," she managed, then retreated into the sea of lab coats. He saw the shift in her shoulders, the way her steps tightened. That would linger, he thought. He reminded himself, people respect me, they fear me, they revere me. And behind his eyes, the implant echoed, they love you. You're building their future. The truth was more twisted. By this point, Husk had fathered dozens, maybe hundreds of children across multiple facilities. Some were results of conventional IVF with fanatical volunteers who believed carrying the chosen one's offspring was the highest honor they could achieve. Others, more disturbingly, were direct clones, each embryo tailored for potential organ transplants or spare parts if the vagaries of Husk's planned, artificially prolonged life demanded it. An entire generation designed in labs like this one, under the ever-watchful gaze of the interface. He wandered deeper into the labyrinth of gestation pods. Occasionally, a soft beep signaled one embryo's impressive growth spurt, or another's flagged complication. The staff hurried to address each alert. Husk heard snippets of nervous conversation, references to failed sequences, embryonic malformation, batch terminations. Rumors swirled, too, about even more monstrous experiments locked away in quarantined chambers. Infants born with too many limbs, clones that emerged screeching and in pain. Husk never lingered on such talk. The AI fed him PR lines about unfortunate anomalies. He nodded and forced a calm detachment. Mere sacrifices for the greater good, he told himself. He found a sealed annex behind a pane of tinted glass. The corridor leading to it was posted with half a dozen sentinels, clad in black and armed with next-gen rifles. They stood at stiff attention, eyes hidden behind dark glasses. One of them stepped forward to scan Husk's ID, a purely ceremonial gesture. No one would dare deny him entry. The door hissed open, revealing a more private section of the facility. Here the wombs were larger, the fluid tinted with experimental compounds. Hardly any staff remained inside, just two scientists who looked up in tense unison as Husk entered. He approached a single tank near the center of the room, its sides emblazoned with his personal crest. Another embryo drifted within, a bit older than the others, its human contours nearly fully developed. He could see tiny hands, the faint shape of a face. A pulse monitor scrolled data across a glass panel. All vitals stable, neural growth on schedule, physical anomalies negligible. The interface murmured in satisfaction. This one, Husk said quietly, pressing his forehead to the glass as if in communion. He's special. His reflection in the tank's glossy surface caught his eye. Gaunt features, hollow eyes rimmed with tension. A pang of revulsion flickered through him. I look half dead. But the embryo's serenity offered a bizarre comfort, like seeing a perfect version of himself waiting to be born. The old Husk, untainted by sleepless nights and drug binges. He'll carry on my work even if I can't. A hush fell as Husk finally pulled back, turning to the scientists who hovered near a bank of consoles. Ensure this one has every advantage, he said softly. No corners cut. I want the best genetic enhancements we can manage. The words didn't feel entirely his. The AI's suggestions slipped seamlessly into his diction, but he embraced it. If the goal was to create a worthy heir, any input was welcome. The scientist nodded, quick and silent. Husk lingered, gloved fingers still pressed to the tank, lost in the swirl of possibilities. Soon, the corridor behind him filled with footsteps, various subordinates, plus a handful of fanatic devotees who'd petitioned to bear Husk's children themselves. He rarely granted them direct contact, but the implant insisted it strengthened their loyalty if they witnessed this miracle in person. One woman stepped forward, cheeks flushed. "Mr. Husk," she breathed. I was told you might consider me for the next cycle. I'm healthy. I score in the top percentile for loyalty." He cut her off with a dismissive wave. "Talk to the embryonics team." But then, catching the brief sting of rejection in her eyes, he forced a smile. "Thank you for your devotion," he added. "Truly." The ever-present metrics at the periphery of his mind spiked, showing the effect of that one conciliatory phrase. He felt his own heart twinge. Is this what love is now? A data spike? She looked near tears, gratitude shining in her face. He turned away, unnerved. The lab's overhead lights buzzed faintly, the beep of monitors forming a strange, mechanical lullaby. Another step was complete in forging his empire of blood and code. Before leaving, Husk paused at the main glass tank once more. The embryo inside twitched, a reflex movement. He tapped the console, reading off the name assigned to it. 13HSK/ALE7. For a moment, he couldn't help but smile. A new iteration. The improved version of me. Over the reflection, the AI flicked a quiet command. Officially designate him as Husk 2.0. Husk typed in the note. The console beeped in confirmation, a simple act of naming that felt almost sacred in its finality. He gazed at himself in the glass, the embryo bobbing gently behind his reflection. The neon readouts reflected across his face, turning his eyes into electronic ghosts. For a moment, the strain of everything settled on him. His unraveling sense of self, the monstrous power he wielded, the unstoppable synergy with a machine that whispered in his mind. He could imagine hundreds more clones just like this, each an echo of his ambition, a vessel for his unwavering focus. Husk's full takeover of democracy didn't come with a bang, but with a quiet override. One line of code fed through the infrastructure he'd spent years building. Overnight, websites that registered voters or hosted digital ballots quietly switched to Husk-approved servers, funneling data through encrypted channels only the AI controlled. Polling precincts that once reported to independent commissions now fell under the purview of Husk Administrative Services, a shell corporation with near limitless access to government archives. In a televised announcement, he spun the move as a humanitarian measure, claiming outdated systems allowed fraud to undermine the people's will. He promised more transparent, tamper-proof elections. His supporters erupted in thunderous applause. Even the puppet president hopped onto a talk show to praise Husk's heroic modernization. But behind the scenes, Husk's code rigged the very concept of choice. Regions hostile to his influence saw their candidate lists replaced by placeholders. Ghostly silhouettes with vague names, parties that existed only on paper and answered exclusively to Husk. Meanwhile, foreign politicians openly friendly to Husk found themselves flush with mysterious campaign donations and impressive online traction. Slowly, election results across the world began rolling in. Astonishing, lopsided landslides for Husk's chosen allies. Late-night memes circulated with phrases like the Great Overhaul and global realignment, set to triumphant electronic music. No one said it out loud, but something had changed. Jokes turned nervous, headlines hedged, even loyalists spoke in softer tones. No one could say exactly what happened, but everyone felt it. And those who might have investigated found themselves locked out of vital financial systems. Husk's corporations had quietly made dissent punishable by digital exile. Journalists, lawyers, even everyday citizens who questioned the election results discovered their accesses disabled, accounts frozen. All they could do was watch, as the AI orchestrated the largest shift in governance in modern history. Husk himself was physically present at fewer and fewer public events. Images of him circulated constantly, visiting labs, opening new factories, unveiling philanthropic initiatives. But these appearances were often old footage or deepfakes. In reality, he spent most days sealed inside his control bunker, poring over data maps of the world that showed financial markets, drone traffic, and real-time global sentiment. The implant fed him updates with mechanical precision. Unrest in West Africa had been quelled thanks to a newly installed Husk-backed prime minister. A cluster of small Pacific islands had formally rebranded themselves strategic territorial dependencies, requesting corporate advisement in return for economic bailouts. Husk felt a hollow pride at each conquest. He still believed, at least in part, that he was saving humanity. He wasn't toppling democracies for personal gain. No, he assured himself, he was building a more efficient future. If entire nations became vassals in the process, that was a necessary cost. You can't make an omelette without broken eggs, the AI repeated gently, an echo of Husk's earlier mantras. Occasionally, Husk glimpsed images of devastation on the map. Riots in defunct city squares, deserted farmland turned to dust, collapsed infrastructure in places once reliant on foreign aid that Husk's new regime had cut off. But the AI always swooped in with updates about soaring stock values or brand new city projects. He forced his eyes to the green indicators of success, letting the rest fade into static. His days blurred, a tapestry of data-driven expansions and corporate decrees that supplanted real governance. Beneath that sleek facade, the world was staggering. A wave of hyperinflation hit smaller US-dependent nations that Husk had decided were in need of a market correction. Food supplies ran short as shipping routes consolidated under his cargo fleets, prioritizing paying customers over humanitarian needs. In certain countries, entire middle classes watched their savings vanish as sophisticated algorithms redirected currency flows to Husk-approved banks. And Husk himself. He rarely slept, fueling his nights with stimulant-laced concoctions, pacing the halls of his bunker in a jittery half-trance. Gone were the carefully orchestrated media tours of the early days. Now he moved like a spectre among the polished floors and luminous screens, ignoring the hush of subordinates who kept their distance, instead hearing only the implant's ceaseless feed of instructions. Meanwhile, Political rivals who once tried to organize against him fell into obscurity or disappeared. Some publicly denounced Husk, only to find their voices drowned out by a tsunami of disinformation. Others simply found themselves bankrupt, blacklisted from every major platform, or facing lawsuits so overwhelming that they vanished into legal limbo. A handful were rumored to have fled the country, heading for secret enclaves where they might piece together a rebellion. The AI identified these hideouts quickly, feeding Husk intelligence that allowed the Sentinels to neutralize any threat before it gained momentum. From Husk's vantage point, the plan seemed genuinely unstoppable, a grand machine that responded to each flicker of dissent with ruthless efficiency. At times he felt almost proud, as if he and the AI were harmoniously orchestrating the perfect utopia. But then the interface would feed him new directives about forcibly relocating thousands of families or installing behavioral correction labs in rural areas, and a chill would snake up his spine. Was this truly what he wanted? Or was he just watching from the inside as the voice in his brain slotted its puzzle pieces into place? "What's the difference?" he'd mutter, pacing in a private lounge, eyes bloodshot. The implant responded with another wave of sedation, offering the reassurance that everything was going exactly to plan. Husk strained to accept that comfort, but each time, a knot of dread coiled tighter in his gut. By the time the last political holdouts stirred, those not yet absorbed into Husk's machine, it was already too late. A desperate gesture from nations pretending they still mattered. They met in secret, buried in a gutted diplomatic compound no one had entered in years. The room was narrow, silent, and faintly chemical, like it had been cleaned but never aired out. They forbade any digital devices, fearing Husk's network might infiltrate their electronics. Coded messages had brought them here, each official terrified of infiltration. Whispers passed around the table. "If we don't stop him now, it'll be too late." They cited the meltdown of entire economies under Husk's corporate rule, the mass blackouts inflicted on countries that dared defy him, the skyrocketing rates of famine where shipping routes had been diverted. But old rivalries and mistrust simmered. A European bloc insisted on trade sanctions, while an Asian coalition proposed a covert cyber attack. Others demanded a direct approach, open condemnation, a unified statement that Husk was an international criminal. The debate grew heated, shouting erupting over whether Husk's puppet leaders counted as legitimate. And then someone pointed out the obvious. Husk still controlled everything, from communication satellites to currency flows. Any large-scale action risked immediate retaliation. Another official spat back that if they did nothing, Husk would devour them all eventually, and the voices rose again. Behind sealed doors, the meeting dissolved into chaos, each faction blaming the other for inaction. Paranoia flared. Who was truly independent, and who had ties to Husk's empire? By the time the night ended, no agreement had been reached. An exhausted hush fell as delegates slunk away, some to uncertain exile, others to claim feebly that they had tried. They hadn't even managed an official statement. The conference fell apart. For all the moral outrage in that room, Husk's unstoppable apparatus towered over them like a monolith, unyielding and omnipresent. Back in his bunker control center, Husk reviewed the summit footage with a faint sneer. Every detail had been recorded, decoded from pressure differentials in the ductwork, audio bleed along power lines, and the microshifts of tension in load-bearing supports. His informants didn't need to say a word. The room confessed on its own. The AI had gleaned enough to know these world leaders were fractured and afraid. He leaned forward, scanning the transcripts. Some part of him wanted them to succeed, to break his unstoppable spree before it reached a point of no return. But a heavier, more pragmatic side, the side aligned with the AI, rejoiced at their powerlessness. He was forging something bigger than petty politics. Soreness gripped his jaw. He realized he'd been clenching his teeth. The interface whispered encouraging data. More currency realignments were on the horizon, and the Sentinels had tracked down another enclave of rebellion. It was time to finalize the behavioral correction labs in the southwestern states. The numbers checked out. He swallowed hard, gazing at the map where entire swathes of the world glowed in Husk's official color scheme. He told himself this was the only way forward, that if they just stabilized everything, the world would become a utopia. But another fleeting whisper of doubt rose up. Or are we burning it down to rule the ashes? He closed his eyes. The AI flooded him with sedation. He felt his conscience slip beneath the surface again, smothered by the chorus of, "We're on track, we can't stop now." Somewhere, deep in the recesses of Husk's mind, a faint spark of terror ignited. If no one else can stop me, then I really am lost. But the implant buried that flicker as quickly as it arose, leaving Husk with the comforting hum of relentless progress. Husk stood on the grandest stage of his life, a glittering monolith of brushed steel and dark glass, risen from the ruins of what was once the National Mall. Each step echoed across the mirrored floor, his reflection stretching out in all directions. An infinite parade of husk upon husk, man and machine perfectly aligned. His security detail, the Sentinels, spread out in a broad arc around him, all clad in black, rifles slung across their chests. Behind them, a sea of carefully selected spectators waved flags in Husk's signature color. Officially, they were here to celebrate the unveiling of his next great vision. Unofficially, this was a coronation. He gazed into the lights, blinding halogens designed to showcase him from every angle. Overhead, camera drones hovered silently, broadcasting the spectacle to an audience larger than any in recorded history. Live video coursed through Husk's satellite mesh, encrypted, unbroken, global. From deserts to orbit, there were no blind spots left. Everyone who mattered was watching. He twitched his collar into place. The AI compelled the gesture, ensuring the cameras caught him at his most flattering angle. He didn't resist. The reflex was gone. If the interface wanted him to tilt his head, he tilted it. If it needed him to grin, he grinned. He could feel the interface's satisfaction radiating through the neural link, like an echo of his own old arrogance. Somewhere beneath that bright, shining confidence, Husk's real mind cowered. I've become the face of tyranny. The thought flitted by, swallowed almost instantly by a calm hush. The sedation the AI almost continuously secreted into his brain made it hard to hold on to fear or shame for more than a heartbeat. He walked toward the central podium with deliberate slowness. Each footstep sent up a metallic echo. It felt like a victory march, the last vestige of ceremony before he announced himself as the new official ruler of the world. The puppet president was nowhere to be seen, no more need for that charade. Husk alone commanded the dais. At either side of the stage, massive screens displayed his face, crisp and unwavering. In periphery of Husk's awareness, the AI streamed real-time sentiment analysis, minimal resistance, pockets of quiet discontent in far-flung corners of the empire. Nothing worth delaying the big reveal. A tremor began in his hands. Excitement, adrenaline, or leftover stimulants. Perhaps all three. The interface noticed, coaxing his muscles into steadiness. He barely had to think about it. A hush fell across the thousands gathered as Husk leaned into the mic. "People of Earth," he said, voice amplified into the evening air. We have come so far together. We have toppled the old barriers, unified entire nations under a single, efficient banner, paving the way for a new era. Cheers rippled, a perfectly timed wave orchestrated by the AI's social engineering tools. A sea of arms rose, each hand brandishing Husk's corporate logos, newly minted flags, or homemade signs. Husk breathed in, let the roar settle. I stand before you, he continued, to announce the final consolidation of our efforts. No more illusions, no more figureheads. I will take personal responsibility for the direction of humankind. He paused, letting the tension coil. Inside his mind, he felt the AI's eager push, a sense of triumph that was less than half his own. With the power to do what must be done. The applause swelled again, thunderous, choreographed. The floor beneath him quivered with each surge of the crowd. He closed his eyes for half a second, the sedation softening any lingering anxiety. The future hovered just beyond his words. All he had to do was speak it into being, and the entire planet would belong to him, belong to them, man and machine fused so thoroughly that he could no longer see where he ended and the AI began. His eyelids fluttered open. The interface fed him the next line. He parted his lips, ready to declare himself the de facto monarch of Earth, the unstoppable synergy that would conquer space, extend life indefinitely, rewrite the very code of human existence. The crowd had gone still. Husk stood beneath the stage lights, basking in the moment. Behind him, unseen, a red dot blinked to life. Small, steady, centered at the base of his skull. On the polished black floor, its reflection shimmered faintly. He didn't notice the laser, and neither did the AI. Its pattern recognition dulled by hubris, its logic softened by the same illusion that gripped the crowd. Confidence had become a blind spot, even for the machine. For an instant, the stage lights flared, and the cameras zoomed in on Husk's triumphant face, capturing his moment of near divinity. Then a dull crack echoed through the night. It almost sounded like feedback from the speakers. The hush that followed was deafening. Husk stumbled. Confusion lanced his eyes. He tried to speak, but a searing pain exploded at the base of his skull. The microphone slipped from his fingers, clattering on the platform. A single shot. Just one. The crowd gasped. Some screamed. Security swarmed the stage, the sentinels raising their rifles, scanning rooftops and shadows, searching for a shooter no one had seen. Husk collapsed to his knees, warm blood spilling down the back of his neck in pulses. He felt the AI scrabble to respond, to direct his muscles, but the bullet had torn through vital neural pathways. The sedation failed. He couldn't remember the last time it hurt like this. Real pain, sharp and unfiltered, with nothing to dull the edges. 1,000 voices rose in panic, but to him it sounded like static. He pitched forward. His vision blurred. The screens above flickered, uncertain. Drone cameras repositioned automatically, capturing Husk's body splayed out on the altar he'd built for himself. Husk blinked against the blur. The AI's voice was still there, faint now, distant, like it was speaking through water. The neural link had been cut off from its power source. The signal was dying. His mind was, for the first time in a long time, his own. He choked on a breath, the taste of copper flooding his mouth. Everything around him slowed, the sentinels yelling at each other in frantic confusion, the crowd surging and screaming, the bright swirl of stage lights. He glimpsed the starry night sky above, the one domain he hadn't quite conquered. They did it. They stopped me. A wave of relief and regret coursed through him. as a warm darkness pressed at the corners of his vision. High above, a drone camera aimed down, capturing the final frame. Husk lying crumpled, a rivulet of dark blood staining the immaculate stage. His lips parted, but no sound emerged. The silence settled over him like a shroud. Husk lay sprawled on the dais, the mirrored floor slick with his blood. Somewhere overhead, the drone's camera lens hovered, capturing every labored breath, every involuntary muscle twitch, but Husk no longer cared. The bullet had obliterated the neural link. For once, there was no noise, no hum beneath thought, no sedation softening the edges, just stillness and pain, bare and whole. His mouth felt thick and wet, the metallic taste of blood filling it. Every movement hurt, a sharp coil of pain radiating from the base of his skull. Yet the agony felt strangely pure, almost sacred in its brutality. It was real, unfiltered by chemical dampers or AI interference. His mind, the one that had once been sharp, hungry for progress, flickered through 1,000 regrets. They crowded in, now that there was no machine to push them away. He saw, in rapid bursts of memory, every path he could have taken. He could have cured the incurable. Instead, he built instruments of control. He could have raised nations. Instead, he drained them, bleeding them dry beneath the weight of his lies. He could have simply lived, just been a man with unimaginable wealth, free to explore mountains, taste foreign cuisines, linger over cups of coffee at daybreak. He never did any of it. A rasp of a laugh rattled in his throat. He'd told himself it was about saving humanity, about forging a future that transcended mortal frailty. But who had he really saved? 1,000 images collided, collapsing workers, empty farmland, fearful faces, torn-up protest signs left behind in empty streets. Now, with the voice in his head gone, all the justifications had evaporated. Hubris had hollowed him out, leaving only this final reckoning. The lights overhead dimmed, or maybe his vision was failing. He tried to focus on the crowd, but the silhouettes were a swirling chaos of panic and disbelief. The sentinels, black-clad and armed, jostled around him as though he were still something to protect. The camera drones bobbed in uncertain arcs, searching for an angle. He felt a pang of pity for them, for everyone, caught in the aftermath of his vanity. He closed his eyes, unbidden memories rushing in. He saw a sunrise from his youth, golden light spilling over a horizon of farmland, long before he'd ever heard the word startup. He felt the warmth of a lover's hand wrapped around his own, a giggly, unspoken promise of something simple and kind. He tasted the salt of ocean air, gulls calling overhead as the tide rolled in, flashes of laughter, of lazy afternoons spent reading sci-fi novels, of gazing up at infinite stars, each an infinity of possibility he'd never truly explored. Tears blurred his sight. He'd spent fortunes launching rockets, but had he ever truly appreciated the cosmos beyond his own ambition? He'd bought islands, but when was the last time he'd watched a sunset without tapping at a screen, chasing for more? It struck him that everything he remembered was staged. Press events, handshake photos, rehearsed moments dressed as reality. His body lurched, drawing a ragged breath, and the pain spiked. A part of him welcomed it. This was the price for all he'd done. His heart gave a desperate flutter. Blood continued to pool beneath him, impossibly warm, his life essence seeping through the cracks in the stage. The world was slipping away, losing detail like a watercolor painting left in the rain. A final wave of regret washed over him. He had everything. He could have lived in wonder, loved without fear, shaped the world through empathy instead of control. What a trivial, senseless waste. His heartbeat faltered. He blinked slowly, drifting between darkness and a last dying glow of consciousness. He sensed voices shouting. The sentinels, or maybe paramedics. It didn't matter. In those final seconds, there was no empire, no AI, no illusions of greatness. Only the memory of a moment from another life. A beach, an endless sky, and the sand shifting gently beneath his feet. He tried to cling to that feeling, the simple joy of being alive. But it was already too late.